Sandra Mitchell.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chaplain Sandra Mitchell. I'm a mental health service provider, and I live in the Bronx and have been schooled by the Bronx. Happy to be here. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Dion Wozio, please introduce yourself. You're muted.
Good evening, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Dion Rozier, born and raised in the South Bronx. I am a middle school principal, been in the Board of Ed for 23 years, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Amy, will you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Amy Tsai, first Vice President of the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group. I'm also a CC member for Citywide Council for District 75 Citywide Programs, as well as a parent here in the Bronx of 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Musa, will you please introduce yourself?
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Sheikh Musa Drame. I am a District 75 parent, as well as the founder of Lifestyle Lifespan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chauncey, will you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, all. Chauncey Young, Bronx parent, and also the director of the New Settlement Parent Action Committee.
Thank you. Principal William Fackleton, will you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. I just first of all want to tip my hat to Farah and all the parents who are here. You guys are doing great stuff. I am a 26-year veteran of the New York City Department of Education and the founding principal of Soundview Academy for Culture and Scholarship, serving the Soundview, Castle Hill, and Parkchester neighborhoods of South Central Bronx.
Okay, Maria, thank you so much, Frank. Maria, will you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Villalobos, and I am a parent leader in the Bronx.
Thank you. So supporting us this evening is Olvin Kaba, our translator, interpreter, and Benga Suber, who's supporting us with technology, and Kala LaChapelle. Thank you so much, and thank you to the whole team for putting this together. And now we'll turn it over to Dr. Samuel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dr. Aaliyah Samuel. I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Local, State, and National Engagement. I am also a parent of 2 young sons in public school, all the while not in New York. I live here in Northern Virginia. And I am joined by several of my colleagues who I'll turn it over so they can introduce themselves. First, I'll turn it over to Donna, Ian, and then Christian.
Good afternoon. This is Donna Harris-Akins. I am the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development. I'm a wife of a native New Yorker and a mom of 2 kids who are in high school. And it's great to be with you all here today.
Hi, I'm Ian Rosenblum. I'm the Acting Assistant Secretary in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, and I'm a New York City parent of 2 kids who are just a little too young to be in K-12 schools yet. And I'm really glad to be with you today and really eager to listen and to learn more about the work that you're doing and the experiences you're having right now.
Good afternoon, Christian Rhodes, Chief of Staff in Office of Elementary and Secondary Ed. Pleasure. This is so important. I put on a jacket today to look official. I am a parent of 2, slightly, actually a month apart from Ian's 2, although my son, the 4-year-old, starts school tomorrow. So we'll be in pre-K, a Montessori program. If you hear some tears or crying, it's likely me and or my wife. So thank you all for the opportunity. Do appreciate it.
Thank you, Christian. So I'll start off the conversation. First thing, would like to share a little bit of the work that the department has been doing over the course of the summer as we prepare to return to school. Also, disclaimer, if there's screaming in my household, it's my boys wrestling. They just got home from school. So it's snack time and unwinding time for them. So over the course of the summer, the department was very busy working on the return to school roadmap. Which I'll happy to share that resource in the chat. The Return to School Roadmap is really a guideline of a combination of resources and supports that really underscore how the department is thinking about returning back to school, and also a wide variety of resources that have either been developed by the department and or key partners that we wanted to amplify. There's really 3 core landmarks of the Return to School Roadmap, and it was really important for us that we laid them out in this particular order, because we recognize that this school year is a unique one. For many young adults, young students, this is their first time back in the building, in some cases 15, 18 months, as well as for educators. And so we really wanted to honor the realities of transitioning back to in-person school. The first landmark within the Return to School Roadmap is really focused on the health and safety, and recognizing that we needed to elevate and underscore the mitigation strategies and the components that needed to be in place to safely reopening schools. As a mom with a son with a 504 plan, who does have special healthcare needs, it's really important to know that the health and safety of not only our kids, but our educators and school personnel would be at the forefront of the conversation. So that's pretty much landmark 1. Landmark 2 is really focusing on the social emotional learning and mental health of not only students, but school personnel as well. We recognize that this transition back to school, all the while it is exciting and welcoming and much needed for so many, it's also a time to really recognize that this experience of COVID has been traumatic in a lot of ways. And so how do we really take the time to understand the needs of everyone coming back into the doors, to really make sure that we are responding to the needs of kids as well as school personnel. So that second landmark is really focused on addressing the social, emotional, and mental health needs of students and school personnel. The third landmark is around accelerating academic attainment, recognizing that there were disruptions in learning over the course of the last 18 months. And how do we really start to think about addressing those academic and instructional needs? And so this Return to School Roadmap is really going to be the foundation of how it has been the foundation of how we're talking about returning to school, but also provides a lot of resources. The one other addition to the Return to School Roadmap that I'd like to highlight is a parent checklist. There's a parent checklist that accompanies the Return to School Roadmap that really helps, I think, elevate the questions that parents could and should be asking as they consider their return to school for their own child. I can tell you in our own household, my husband and I had a lot of very intentional conversations on the return to school for our own children, recognizing we have 2 kids with 2 very different personalities, but also one that does have special healthcare needs. And so making sure that we were asking our own school leaders the right question in order to return them to in-person school. And so there'll be an opportunity at the end of the conversation if there's specific questions on the Return to School Roadmap. Happy to talk about it, but I want to next turn it over to my colleague Donna, who will be talking a little bit about the work that the department is doing to address some of the concerns around equity.
Thank you. So I will start by saying the focus on equity is a whole of government approach that President Biden has focused on from his first day in office. And those of you who tracked his activity during the campaign saw evidence of that as well, even before the administration started. Since we've been here, it has been literally day one. There was an executive order that was released that was focused on essentially on racial justice and racial equity. But also equity, inclusively speaking, and making sure that we're looking at all of the levers, all of the programs, all of our processes to make sure that we are being as equitable as possible. And as the secretary says often, we are not just trying to focus on random acts of equity. We're trying to make sure that we're using the transformative power that we have at our disposal to focus on equity in everything that we do. So the way that it's translated for the team that we have at the Department of Ed, there is an equity action team at the agency. And the executive order called for one at each agency in the government, and ours is purposefully built with colleagues of varied experiences, varied expertise, varied titles, varied backgrounds, so that we're taking advantage of the full breadth of the department's talent and expertise and experiences to bring to bear in these conversations and in the actions that we plan to take. And so the goal is to make sure that we're looking at equity first before we make decisions, before we do the planning time, before we walk into meetings. We look at the equitable levers in front of us. We actually look at the data that speaks to equity or the lack of data where we don't have enough to actually make a decision about what is equitable and what is not. And making sure that we're bringing all of those factors to the table before we make decisions so that we don't have to try to retrofit equity on the back end. So how that has translated is, Aaliyah spoke about the roadmap earlier about reopening. So in the first month that we were at the department or that we were in office, we released a COVID reopening handbook that was focused very closely to the CDC guidance that was coming out on the same day. So it was almost exclusively focused on the health and safety factors that CDC was releasing at that time for the first time in quite a while for schools, and most particularly K-12 schools. So the next thing that we did after doing that project, which was called for in a different executive order, was look at the things surrounding schools, surrounding students, surrounding educators and families, and the kinds of questions that we were getting in the process of releasing the first volume. And we actually released a second volume in April that focused on creating safe and healthy learning environments for students, addressing lost instructional time, and supporting educator and staff stability and well-being. Mainly because those were the issues that we were hearing, not just from families, but from educators and students when we talked to them about the kinds of things they wanted the Department of Ed to focus on or to give them some information on and or to highlight best practices. So I will leave part of that to Ian and Christian to talk about best practices, but we did release guidance in April that focused on those three buckets of things. And we still continue to talk to states, to districts, to educators, to families, to students, to community groups that need to know what to do or what the next steps are as they're trying to figure out how to reopen their schools. We also released guidance around higher ed because we know that some of the gaps were from students trying to move from one part of their educational career to the other, and most particularly from high school into their post-secondary opportunities that they wanted to pursue, whether that was to further their career technical education pathway, whether that was to go to college, whether it's to be part of an apprenticeship. People needed guidance on how to move to the next step. And that is true. That was true actually throughout all of the educational changes and movements in the system during COVID, but most particularly from the K-12 system to higher ed. So we wanted to close that gap because that's where we were seeing the most drop off or potential for drop off for students to, quite frankly, to miss their dreams. And we know that that was going to impact most particularly students of color and families of color in that space. So that is but one example of the kinds of things that we're trying to do to make sure that we are not only listening to some of the pinch points and trying to address them, but actually making sure that we are talking to not just the usual suspects, but trying to talk to people who actually are in a school or have kids in school or are in supportive services trying to support and wrap their arms around our students to make sure that what we are doing is actually going to help. And to the extent that we can partner with people, whether that's a state, a district, or community group, to make sure that we are not only doing the right thing, but saying the right things and making sure that we're appropriately partnering with the appropriate community leaders, we are doing that as well. So I will end there. Happy to take questions at the end, but I know there's a lot more to get through.
Thank you, Donna. I will turn it over to Ian now.
Thanks so much, and really looking forward to the discussion. So as Donna said, equity is really a through line across all the work of the administration, and one place where it's certainly centered for us is in the American Rescue Plan, which was the set of resources that the President and Congress put in place last March to support states and school districts, schools, and educators in meeting the needs of students. It included $122 billion for what's called the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And of that, New York State received about $9 billion of resources. These funds from the American Rescue Plan are really critical for a number of reasons. One, they support states and school districts in providing more safe in-person learning environments for students. They support the whole child. They support students' social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs. Critically, they address the educational inequities that were exacerbated by the pandemic. They promote transparency and accountability. And very important for this department and administration, they ensure that states and school districts bring to the table the voices of those who can best speak to how to meet these goals at the state and local levels and who have been most impacted by the pandemic. And so one of the things that we did in getting these resources out and urging states and school districts to make them available quickly to meet students' needs is emphasizing the importance of stakeholder engagement. And in fact, for the first time in this pandemic and in the use of these in any resources that of education that have been put out, we actually required meaningful stakeholder input into how funding decisions were being made at both the state and local levels. So we required states to submit a plan for how they would use their share of the resources and to engage parents, families, students, educators, civil rights organizations, and stakeholders representing the needs of particular groups of students, including students with disabilities and multilingual learners, before they were able to put their plan together. And then likewise, every school district, including of course New York City, is required to put forward its own plan for their share of the funds. And those plans must also be put together reflecting stakeholder input and by demonstrating how they are engaging a diverse set of stakeholders in these processes. And so that has been really critical to us. It's a key aspect, not only of transparency, but really of making sure that these plans help support doing what the resources are intended to do, which is make the most difference for students during this critical period. And so that work is now ongoing, obviously in New York and across the country. And we at the department are really eager to provide all the supports that we can. The secretary often says that we should view ourselves as a service delivery agency. And one of the ways that we've done that is to try to highlight best practices so that educators can learn from each other. And my own 4.5-year-old is here and eager to pipe in if you hear a little bit in the background, so that school districts and educators can learn from each other about some of the strategies during this critical period. And Christian can talk a little more about the best practices clearinghouse. That's just one of the ways that we've been working to provide those resources to educators on the ground.
Thanks, Ian. So I think just real quickly on the best practices clearinghouse, as part of the executive order 14,000. I don't say 14,000. I think that's the inappropriate use of the term, but the executive order required us to stand up a best practices clearinghouse. And it was a pretty large task as a new administration coming in, but we were able to pull it off. And immediately what we saw was that over 1,100 submissions were given to us from all over the country of those best practices. And you can actually go to our website, bestpracticesclearinghouse.ed.gov, and the information is there. You can search by equity tags, students with disabilities, English learners, students coming from conditions of poverty, because we were purposeful about how we kind of sorted the information. And what this administration has done, particularly the secretary, has really shown that he is interested less about what we have to say as professionals of the department and more about what's happening in the field on the ground. So almost in every speech, almost in every tweet, there's going to be some information about what a district is doing, what a state is doing, what parents are doing to organize in their communities and support the best interests of their students and families. So we can provide you the link specific for this chat. You can have it, and if you have any additional questions, or more importantly, if you know of some great practices that are happening or things that you would like for us to review, feel free to send it to us, and I'll include it in the chat and follow up as well.
Thank you so much for that question. So I think now I'm supposed to talk a little bit about the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group and what we do. So generally speaking, the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group is just parent leaders coming together. So we are a combination of the school boards, now called the Community Education Councils, of which I'm the president of Community Education Council 8. Also, I forget my titles once in a while. So all the CCs 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 in the Bronx have come together to try to address some of the problems that we deal with in the Bronx as an underserved, under-resourced community. But we're not just made up of parents, because we do have teachers with us, principals, parent coordinators, you name it, they are part of the group, students. And I am glad that I heard Donna and Ian talk about some of the things that we are very concerned about, which are first and foremost, how the guidelines translate on the ground, because sometimes as parents, we see the lack of systems and structures that prevent what the intentions are, whether they be at the state, city, or federal levels. And then we are very concerned about equity, right? Because at least in New York City and in New York State, we talk about equity a whole lot, but we as parents and as teachers, because I am by profession a teacher, as teachers, we don't really see that and translate very well on the ground. So we are always concerned about, how our parents who are immigrant and do not speak English, how they get access to language and content, and just knowing information, like just knowing what's happening. We are always concerned about how we're concerned about the fact that the system of education does not actually address, in many ways, the plights of kids who are very poor and overwhelmingly minority, right? Black, brown, and Asian, or LGBTQ, or what have you. And as at the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group, we are very concerned on how to create the system of shared governance where parents are truly at the table, not when things are rolled out, but before they are rolled out, as they are being thought of and thought about and thought through, so that we can also bring our perspective, so that when something is rolled out, it doesn't negatively affect not only the students, our children, but the family and the community at large. And then we are concerned that when we are dealing with the child, that we're not really dealing with the whole child, because children don't live in vacuums and in social silos. So when we talk, whether we're talking about mental health or literacy or math or what have you, it's a family affair, right? And it's a community affair. And the reason we feel it the most in the Bronx, and I assume in other communities like the Bronx, it's because the communities themselves are somewhat deficient in those things, right? Because when you think about, the literacy rate or the employment rate or so many other things that actually affect education, we don't have an educational system that actually responds, right, to the poverty that these children are facing, and consequently design the type of educational system that will help them to get out of poverty, right, the minute that they graduate. So those skills are things that are learned, from cradle really to graduation or even conception. So we are definitely interested in creating, right, as part of the educational system, a system within a system that deals specifically with the needs of poor students in underserved, under-resourced communities. And for this reason, we are very interested in policy, and we are very interested in educating our parents, which is the reason we wanted this to be live streamed and public, so that our parents understand that when they are advocating, it's not enough to advocate, to the chancellor or to the mayor here, but it's at every level. It's the federal level, it's the state level, it's the city, it's your municipality, or what have you, so that we are hoping to be able to contribute, right, to a system that really works collaboratively, not only with all the stakeholders, but at all levels. So that is the major overview of the work that we've been doing. And so we address obviously policy, we address poverty, we address language access, questions of inclusion, and most of all, just raising the poverty level, because we do believe that you cannot make a difference in education and truly educate our kids the way they need to be educated if you don't also reach out to the family and the community. So you have to simultaneously elevate the family, elevate the community as you're trying to elevate the students. And obviously we want a lot of support for our educators because, as I said before, I'm one. So thank you. So having said that, I guess we'll turn it, unless you want to respond, Dr. Samuel.
Yeah, I think I would. I am in full disclosure watching the chat. I also am listening to your comments. And I think one of the things that I want to first do is just recognize that there are layers of concern around reopening, and they're real. I'm not even going to try to say that they're not, because I know that they are all too real. But I can tell you, and I'd like to tell actually all the parents that are on this call, that I can say with 100% confidence, particularly the staff members that are on the call from the department, like, we are here wanting to broker this conversation to really be a conduit of support, not only to the Bronx Parent Advocacy Group, but we've had so many of these types of conversations over the course of the summer. We have literally been speaking to hundreds of thousands of parents across the United States to really hear what the concerns are and to be that broker of change. I can share that the secretary has told us consistently that he wants us to model the level of engagement and listening to parents and school personnel and educators and even young people, the actual students that we're serving, to help inform the decisions of the department. And so we are, we're only 8 months into our roles. I think Ian and Donna are a little longer because they were literally like individuals one at the department. But just know that we are truthfully listening with hopes to be able to be brokers of change and at least facilitate the right conversations. The way education works, there are a lot of decisions that are local control, and we can't usurp that. But what we can do is to be able to share and elevate the work that we're trying to push in a very in the early stages of an administration. And so I just wanted to make sure. Most recently, we did a webinar with the United Parent Leaders Action Network, and they represent about 140,000 parents across the United States, primarily first-generation immigrant parents. And so this dialogue is really important for us and it's just the beginning. And so I just think it's important that folks know that this is not just specific to Bronx, but it is more importantly a fundamental core of what this administration is trying to do to make sure that we're listening to all voices across the United States and to all that we serve. And so with that, I just wanted to put that out there, and then we can keep the conversation going and figure out next steps from there.
Yes, thank you so much. And so now we'll turn it over to Dr. Chen, Stuart Hayes, to make the argument of why parents really feel like they ought to have a remote option in New York City. And we hope that you will elevate it for us because we know you don't have control over that. Thank you, Stuart.
All right, thanks to everyone on the call. Appreciate the chat is just lit. So glad that you all are watching and typing. Appreciate the DOE staff too. Let's hope that we can give you some new and specific Bronx related things as we talk today. We need the remote option for everyone. We now have 50,000 children who are sick in Texas alone with COVID. It didn't have to be this way. Florida and Georgia are going to be there very soon. As a counselor educator, as a professional counselor, as a school counselor and a mental health counselor, number one ethical issue is do no harm. My medical colleague on the call, same thing. That's our job number one. We beg of you, you can change the course of history in this country by rallying and challenging your boss and saying everybody needs a remote option now. Let parents have the choice. Let educators have the choice. We lead the nation, unfortunately, in asthma rates in the South Bronx. We open our windows of our schools without ventilation systems, and our kids and educators are breathing in those toxic fumes that Robert Morris designed 50, 60 years ago when he put all the highways through our neighborhoods in the Bronx. That hasn't changed. So what we need from you right now is a demand that every student gets KN95 masks, that every adult gets N95 masks, no question, because cloth masks don't work against COVID, against Delta, and the surgical masks, stuff escapes. We need the best. We need to make sure that every room has adequate air circulation. Not only all windows open, windows aren't enough. Tons of our Bronx schools don't even have air conditioning units. Our HVAC are missing the ability to even install MERV 13 filters. We need MERV 13 filters in every single office, every single classroom. We need air purifiers. The mayor went out and bought IntelliPure, which is like the worst possible, doesn't even include HEPA filters, spent millions on this. There's no accountability. We need the ones that actually work, that are going to save lives. We need carbon monoxide detectors as well in every single classroom. So we need these bottom line specifics yesterday. Schools open in less than a week. No one should have to go back and teach, counsel, lead, or learn in circumstances where we know already tons of children, educators have gotten sick and too many have died. I don't ever, as a professor, want again to go through a year where I had a student die from COVID. I was on the phone for 2 months with another student on a respirator who, thank goodness, is now alive. We know we have the greatest possibility. We have people talk about a deficit model in schools, talk about at-risk students. One of my mentors, Beth Booth Swadner, uses the term at promise. Our students, our families, our educators have the greatest promise in the Bronx, but only if we protect them and keep them safe in this incredible pandemic health emergency. So please adjust your policies to get the fixes now. And if we don't get them, remote option for all. Last, none of our pre-K through 8 even have access to a vaccine. We know they're coming. Delay pre-K through 8 until all children have the ability to be vaxxed. That's what we've done with chickenpox, what we've done with measles. Our kids deserve the best. I always say the Bronx deserves the best. Please ensure we get that.
Thank you so much, Stuart. And I want you to know, somebody told me to let you know that it's not just the Bronx, it's Manhattan too. And to be fair,
Queens and Brooklyn and nationwide, yes.
And I have to say the Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group has grown tremendously in numbers because of this remote option situation. So we have members from all over now. So having said that, I will turn it over to Principal William Fackleton to talk a little bit about that new education vision that we have in the Bronx.
Thank you, Farah. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we hear you well.
Great. I just want to thank Dr. Chen Hayes for your, speaking straight. It's great. And, my colleague, Dr. Dion over here, we share the same catchment zone in the DOE language. That is, we serve the 10473 zip code. You live in the 10473 zip code, you come to Dion or you come to me, and we take care of all kids regardless. The problem with the community school model traditionally, and Dr. Chen spoke about the deficit model, is that it gets stuck in deficit thinking. Like everyone needs saving, and yet some need saving, but some are actually the next Elon Musk, and they need to be paid attention to. I had children who emailed me more than ever in the pandemic. I'm in more communication than I've ever been with my kids. I'm able to connect them now with virtual mentors. We have former graduates. Soundview Academy was founded in 2009 based on the International Baccalaureate. We wanted to bring a global diplomatic quality of programming into a zoned community study. They said it couldn't be done. And we wanted to flip the script. So Dion and I have been flipping the script of 10473 now for over a decade. And what we found is you have to do both. And it's great to hear that the U.S. Department of Education is committed now to the mental health and I would say, mental and physical health of staffs and scholars, because it isn't just the students that we need to support, because it's those adults that are in there day after day that are the true heroes, and they need to be taken care of, extremely so. And we need to look into much more federal programs to support breakaway counseling models like we have, where we work with 3 universities, Fordham, NYU, and Lehman. So we have, I think, over 20 counselors for 300 kids, because we all, to a certain degree, suffer trauma. But if you know anybody like I know, who's dealt with their trauma productively, figured out how to transform it into empowerment and transcendence, these are the future leaders. Remember, South Bronx combined 2 turntables and a microphone. They know what to do with technology. Multi-billion-dollar international organization. The children of Bronx don't need to be rescued. They need to be supported, resourced, but we can't go into a triage model. The issue with community schools is we let the charters get way ahead of us with the STEM model. But we have a better one that Michelle Obama clearly articulated during her husband's presidency, which was the STEAM model. Because one thing that our students have in abundance, and if you've worked in urban schooling as long as I have, as we have, you know this, is social capital. Our kids are not lacking in character and resilience and experience. What they don't have is the resources to have 21st century access to college and career skills. We put a bad name on vocational ed. And we started to talk about this paradigm of all children for university, which is true. Nobody should be denied in higher education, but we have kids who are ready to enter literally at 18 years of age. We've had kids design software recognized by President Obama and are now working for corporate. I'm sure they'll go back to 4-year schools at one point and get that college degree. But if we have students that are absolute geniuses in STEM, and we commit as community schools to offer them the programmatic resources to tap into that potential starting at 11 and 12, not waiting and hoping they get into a STEM-focused high school, but truly turning community schools into what I call polytechnical institutes, then we will not only erase that difference between private and public, we'll actually surpass it, because you add the cultural capital of a community school. There's nothing more powerful than a parent like Farah and the ones here. I've always said the best schools in the world are American public schools. The worst ones are failing American public schools. We know that, right? And I appreciate Farah's opportunity. A couple of things. When we designed Soundview Academy for Culture and Scholarship, we were intentional about arts, full arts teachers. We have a toy maker that's a visual artist. We have a former Broadway productionist that teaches theater. We have a choreographer from FIT that teaches dance. The arts are so important. We're starting to look at media specialists instead of librarians, right? Because current day libraries are actually multimedia centers where books can be accessed through iPads and high leverage volumes. Books that are nice to touch and turn should be on the shelves. But we should also consult with kids on those libraries. They should look more like Barnes and Noble than our traditional Dewey Decimal System libraries. We have to rethink these things. We have to invent the 21st century. The community schools like Dion's and mine's, we're ready for this, but we're not given the resources. An example, it took me 5 years to convince the Department of Education that no middle schooler will take a shower and go to gym anymore. What I got back for years was, what if the next principal wants to use those? I said, it's 2,100 square feet. We need to repurpose. We need to look at these buildings as physical plants and turn them into polytechnical institutes, get out of this modality where we rescue a few, send them to Stuyvesant, and there's nothing wrong with that. We need the selective high schools, right? Need to have greater representation of Black and brown children. But standardized examinations used as a determinant to ask them will never make that happen, because we don't test prep Black and brown children from the time they're in grade school, like many other students in the city. They don't have a competitive advantage. They will make it up over the long run, but what we need to do is use more comprehensive assessments, portfolios, true performance-based assessment in the arts, in the sciences. My evaluation never includes anything outside of English and math. And we've watched the research as the curriculum has become extremely narrowed with this obsessive focus on math and ELA test scores. Arts have dropped. STEM is not offered, right? Applied learning is not the modality that's taught. Yet many of us here know that's what we look for our own children in the Montessori's and the other schools that use more of a project-based modality and use comprehensive and authentic assessment, such as Flipgrid mastery of math standards, as opposed to a standardized pencil and paper test. So we have to decide, are we just going to survive, or are we going to thrive? And my argument here, and what Farah has asked me to speak to towards it, is you have to do both. And so our motto has been thrive, not just survive the pandemic. You cannot forget about the top end. You have to look at the data. You have some kids who are absolute intellectual powerhouses that come into a middle school. And just so you know, in New York, we're 6 through 8. So we get them at 11. I know them because they run up to me and start asking questions about the nature of the universe. That's what's beautiful about being around 11-year-olds. They want to know about hydroponic gardening. Why aren't there more grants to put those hydroponic gardens on our roofs? They want to know about color and design. It's a very social media. They want to run our social media. We're handing them over. We're handing the keys over to our Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok accounts. The community school model is where our students are entrepreneurs and teach us. We need to listen what the future 21st century. Now is the moment to create it. We have to stop talking just about it in abstract terms and allow students and parents like the ones here to have a collective conversation. We can't pretend any one of us that we know what the true 21st century school is. We have to be willing to roll up our sleeves and make it.
Thank you so much, Frank, because we're running out of time, but I saw in the chat, Frank for mayor. All right. So now moving on, guys, we're really tight on time. I will pass it on to Sheikh Musa, Marie Will, and Sandra Mitchell to make the argument for health.
So I'll start us off. As we already discussed, the Bronx has borne a major burden during this pandemic. And COVID has claimed the lives of over 500 children nationwide. The majority of those deaths occur in children with pre-existing condition. Of those, you want to know what the most common pre-existing conditions are? They're asthma and obesity. So I'll let Musa talk a little bit more obesity. Let me address the asthma component. We all know that New York State has consistently been amongst the highest in terms of the prevalence of childhood asthma, right? And the New York City itself has one of the highest rate of hospitalizations and death due to asthma from children to young adults, and Black Latino patients make up about 80% of those cases. And then even among the New York City boroughs, the asthma rate in public school children, specifically age 5 to 14, are by far the highest in the Bronx, by far. And it has been increasing in the last decade or so. Asthma hospitalization rate for Bronx children is 70% higher than the rest of the city and 700% higher than the rest of the state if you exclude the city. There's also a higher rate of death, by the way, in the Bronx from asthma. It's nearly double the rest of the city, and it's almost 3 times higher than the national average. Some neighborhoods in the Bronx have an estimated 20% of children with asthma. So why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because school is an important component of children's health. It's where they spend the most time, right? In the South Bronx, children have about a 20% chance of attending a school that's right next to a highway where polluted air can exacerbate the disease. I'm talking about it because as we send children back to school, we've been talking in the chat about a remote option, right? Not having a remote option endanger the lives of children all over the city, but it especially does so for these children in the Bronx that already have poor resources, that are already in schools near the highways, that already have less ventilation, that are already starting with less. And And it's our obligation to protect those most vulnerable children, not just talk about an improvement of air quality in school, not just do pamphlets about asthma, but we need to protect them against the actual exacerbation of asthma, including, in this case, viruses like COVID, which is a major exacerbation of asthma. And that is the role that we as educators, as parents, as leaders must play in protecting our children's health. Let me pass it on to Musha to talk about the next part about our health.
Thank you, Dr. Mary. Thank you all for having us here today. We believe that education is a wholesome process. Therefore, schools must be wholesome centers where they produce wholesome individuals. Here in the Bronx, we have been ranked 62nd out of 62 New York State counties when it comes to health. Because of that ranking, it also affects our students. That is why, unfortunately, you're walking to many Bronx schools. What you see is children who are overly obese. And because of what they consume, the junk that they consume, and because of their lack of exercise, and because of the home poverty they come from, you combine all these things, it affected their academic achievement, it affected their behavior, and it affected their overall health and wellness. And for that reason, in the last several months, stakeholders in the Bronx, were meeting under the leadership of FARA, to create what we call Operation FIST. Operation FIST now has been formally adopted by our Bronx DOE superintendent. And back in April, for the first time in the Bronx, the schools in the Bronx celebrated Minority Health Month. A lot of the students and parents did not know that the federal government, regard April as Minority Health Month until this year. So we are very excited, with the possibility of incorporating health and wellness so that these students who are struggling academically, if they eat right and, have, right, school environment, perhaps that will help them. So, we are more than happy to share the pillars of, Operation FIST and what does it entail and how relevant they are to all schools, especially schools serving, low-income, students. So thank you, and I look forward, to answering questions. Yeah, what you're looking at here are the 7 pillars of the actual program we call Lifestyle Lifespan. Because unfortunately, a lot of these students, not only, they're coming from impoverished background, but they come from broken homes. Some of them don't even have homes. Some of them were never taught about economics and finance. Some of them were never taught about relationship between parents and children because they don't have 2-parent households. Some of them don't have any parent actually. And they never thought about spirituality and faith. They never thought about, what they will be when they graduate. So many basic, things have not been taught to these kids. And for that, we decided to develop these 7 pillars that can create a wholesome person. And we'll be more than happy to share them, with all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Musa. Moving it on to Sandra. Sorry, because we got to speed it up because we don't want to lose beautiful folks from the U.S. Department of Education. Go ahead, Sandra.
Blessings to everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Farah. And thank you for all for coming together to discuss how we will collectively create the best learning, nurturing, and wellness-centered environment for our schools. My name, again, is Chaplain Sandra Mitchell, and I'm a member of the Bronx Parents Leader and Advocacy Group, and also a member of the New Settlement Apartments Parent Action Committee. By profession, I am a certified mental health counselor and trainer with a focus on wellness and holistic healing of the mind, body, and spirit. And I have also spent some years as an after-school tutor in the public schools and also teaching adults to learn to read and write in the public libraries. Today, I'd like to share with you my concerns and thoughts of this great opportunity for us to create mental health and wellness in all schools. And that is mental health. When I say mental health, it's student-centered, it's wellness-focused, and it's for our students, parents, teachers, paraprofessionals, and administrators, as well as our communities that are person-centered. I also am concerned about the type of community-based organizations and mental health professionals who may service the social and emotional needs of the schools and the community at large. I want to be really very careful about that. Specifically, I would like to understand how we would like to handle the following: conflict resolution, mediation, de-escalation of arguments, fights, and bullying, grief counseling, emotional healing to support our parents, open door policy and space for parents to be an integral part of the school. And also, just so how does that all roll out in different schools, different districts, and in different states? In closing, again, I'm a mental health service provider and focus on mental health and wellness and holistic healing. And I have some suggestions so that we can be able to do that. Prayer, meditation, yoga, stretching, deep breathing, talk therapy, healing circles, positive self-talk, daily affirmations, self-esteem building. These are just a few things that I would love to see in every school in the daily to day-to-day activity that we can all benefit from. Student-centered, parents, administrators, staff, we can all benefit from. So I look forward to having more conversations and really creating the types of schools that we need that are student-centered, person-centered, and healing and wellness centered. Thank you.
Okay, guys, we need to really hurry up and try to get it through. So we want to, Dr. Rosier, I'm going to trust you and Taj to do prison to pipelines, school to prison pipelines in like 2 minutes. Go. You're muted.
And I already took some minutes away. All right. So I want to say thank you, Farah. Thank you to Bronx parent leaders and United States Department of Education. So, really quickly for me, this is real, right? This is not theory. This is not no textbook. This is not no research. I actually stood in front of judges. Pleading the case for my students, asking the judge, please give me the school another opportunity to be an advocate for my son. And it's not wasn't my son, the mother was standing next to me, because I see my students as my sons and daughters, right? And so, when I think about the prison to pipeline, the thing also that's huge is that there's no reversal, right? Many times, once they get in that pipeline, many of these students don't graduate, right? They don't graduate from school because of the trajectory. And so one of the things I want to say really quickly is what's really needed is what I was there doing. We need more advocacy for our Black and Latino males, amen? And we also need to have more mentors and positive, influential people there. In regards to school policing, 2 things I need to stress. The first thing is a major conflict is the fact that many times we have an automatic imposing of severe punishment. And number 2, many times there's no training, right? And so one of the things, I'm going to bring it to a close, Farah, one of the things that we really do at our school is the fact that our school safety officers, we work in collaboration. We do restorative practices. We work in unity, right? And so that there's a whole different lens and approach and paradigm we work from. I just feel that we need to continue to have more education and more knowledge and working from the heart. Like if we see our students as sons and daughters, there's a way in which we will handle, speak, and deal with them.
Okay, thank you so much. I will try to get to you, but we have 2 minutes left. Dr. Samuel, is there any way that someone from your team can stay behind so we can finish the presentation and they can take notes for you?
I know 2 of us are on the same external partner call. We actually have one more call from 5 to 6 because we are meeting with so many external partners. So I know I can't. I don't know if Christian might. And Serena actually dropped to open up that call. So we're all
Christian,
back to back.
Sorry, Christian, will you stay with us for a few extra minutes?
I will stay as long as you're okay with my son screaming.
Yes, we are okay with your son screaming. Thank you so much, Dr. Samuel, and thank you, Donna and Ian. And I don't know if I'm missing anyone. I can't see everything, but we really appreciated the time and we hope for a follow-up. And with that, I will give the floor to Taj to continue. And again, Dr. Samuel, thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you, Farah, and thank you to everyone from the department here today. I will try to be the fastest speaker ever. I think when we're talking about the school to prison pipeline, something really important to remember in the context of remote learning and COVID-19 is that where Black and Latino children are concerned, we actually saw an increase in their academic performance and their comfort due to the availability of a remote option, because the things that the criminalization and the over-policing that they often experience in the in-person space was not something that they had to deal with virtually.
I think we lost you, Taj. Taj, we'll come back to you in the interest of
Nurse
time.
in every school, a social worker. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Taj?
Just move us to the next person.
Yeah, we'll come back to you, Taj.
And she can come back.
Yeah, so Amy and Maria, you have the floor now. Bye, thank you. You have the floor now to discuss parent engagement, empowerment, and parents as partners.
Sure, thank you, Farah. Thank you, everyone, for giving me the time. I'll start it off and then Amy will go after me. As parents, our responsibility includes education, since the children's first teachers are family members. We, the parents, must always decide what is best for them from the moment of birth until they become adults. All responsibility of doing the best for them falls on us. Parent involvement has been encouraged since the birth to build successful partnerships with medical personnel, educators, and other parents. Parent involvement has been implemented as part of the school reforms to strengthen these partnerships. Being parents, we must be recognized as the primary influence in our children's life. Parent involvement needs to be transparent, accessible, provide equity and inclusion in order to be the partnership to be successful. To begin, we must communicate. We must have communication. It must be reciprocated between parents and schools. By law, we are ensure that parents will get information in a language they understand. Multilingual language learners, English language learners, language access should not be a barrier in the Bronx, as it is now. A city that is so diverse, communication should be shared in all languages without a lengthy waiting period. Many families relied on their own child to be the translator, taken away from their education success. We need qualified translator, but also emphasize that the interpretation services should be a universal investment and not one that the principal of the school has to allocate from their budget by taking away from an excelling educational curriculum to be able to provide as such. The school should be encouraging parents to participate in volunteering work. The PTA, Parent Teacher Association, Parent Association, or voluntarily at the food pantry, all cultural activities. Stop excluding us from being involved. We should be sharing responsibilities for decision-making about our children's education. We need to be included in committees for policymaking, health, and well-being, and collaborating with community organizations that reflect schools' aspirations for all children, not just for the sake of being included, but to voice the feedback of parents. Parent involvement policy needs to be implemented and supported. Parents need to know and be supported as decision makers. Their leadership skills need and should be developed in governance, advisory, and advocacy role. Doing so will lead to support others and inspire many to grow. Advocate for legislation and policies that protect the right of parent involvement in shared decision making so that they just don't hear, but listen to our suggestions, concerns, and feedbacks. We also are requesting for school educators, communities, and the state to have access to provide instruction and schooling for parents to learn about the selection policy and processes for choosing curriculum materials in school and working with state teachers, certification agencies to require parents training for certifications while being mindful of ethnic and cultural background, increasing opportunity for the development of parenting skills and sharing learning resources adequately. We have seen that in the past during this pandemic, our numbers in parent engagement have increased. And just as such, we should continue to do so, to keep not only the parents, but our children that are the most important and valuable piece of this whole puzzle. Thank you.
Sarah, I just wanted to kind of be respectful of everyone's time. I do, unfortunately, we'll need to drop off in a couple minutes. I do want to provide some wrap up and next steps, if possible. So I yield to you, on the appropriate space to do that, but I don't want to walk away. I don't want to leave away without thinking through what next steps are from at least a department's lens. So you let me know how to best do that.
So are you ready to listen to just Amy? Because she will be in a couple of minutes or.
Sure. Is Amy the last speaker?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we wanted to come back to Taj, but if we can't, well, but that's it. After Amy and Taj, that's it.
Sure. If we can do Amy, and let me just wrap up. And no disrespect to Taj, I love hearing your voice. I just want to make sure I get a chance to provide appropriate wrap up,
Okay.
and respect the rest of my calendar as well. So I do apologize.
Thank you. It's okay. Amy?
It's been a it's so important that parents are part of this conversation, as roles of parent culture revolve around engagement and empowerment in the decision making and the guidance of pathways for our children's education in schools and in the community. Really wanted to just target on how demographically in the Bronx, it's majority of Hispanics and very low percentage of white Caucasians. And in between, there's so many different diverse communities, and Bronx being the most diverse county in this nation with so many, residents who are multiracial and multi-ethnical, that 89% of every two families are very different of one another. And so language really important, like Maria mentioned. About 45% of the families don't speak English in the house. A large percent of the families speak a different language as their primary language. And giving access to families is really important about how inclusive and equitable we want the decision-making for our students' education to thrive and have higher academic achievements. And then to really center, how can we connect our families, making sure that schools are reaching out to the families in all different entities, and also engaging in multiple activities from cultural events to traditional celebrations throughout the entire school year, not just supposedly as like one holiday. Creating spaces for opportunity for parents and family members to engage in, bake sales or fundraising, or even bring more programming into the schools. But also elaborating for older kids from middle school and high school, the academic culture that we want to bring to the spaces. As many of the families in the Bronx who don't have, higher education, who may not have a high school diploma, to really support their child as a whole through their academic credit for high school or even college, post-secondary. And so giving them opportunities for families who are English language learners, ESL programming, and skills. Parents who are students with disability, offering them resources for the community. So really engaging what parent engagement and parent empowerment really means for the community, as well as their child and the children that are in the city. I appreciate your time for sharing. I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Go ahead, Christian. It's for you.
Sure.
Now to,
No, thank you. I just wanted to, I hate leaving meetings without thinking through demonstrating what we heard, and secondly, talking about next steps. So I wanted to do that adequately with the little time that we have left. So Farah, I just want to acknowledge the difficult task you were in as trying to facilitate this meeting with so many people who have something to say, extremely important. So thank you for your leadership and the way in which you did it gracefully without being rude and cutting people off. That was very, It's a difficult task. I recognize it immediately. Secondly, I just want to demonstrate, I want to just note what I heard. And I think it's important for me to make sure that I heard it correctly along with my colleagues from the department. So, clearly through the chat and through the conversation today, it rings loud and clear that you all are, concerned about the health and safety of your students and the faculty, particularly in the South Bronx. But there's been a few additional folk who are out in the chat who are saying, don't forget about us. And I think that's fair. And that's what we've heard across the country. And it relates to the remote option. It sounds like you're saying a virtual option. Different places have different nomenclature, but what I hear is the virtual option of sorts so that families can choose what they see fit for their own learning. That's what I'm interpreting. Secondly, I think there was a strong advocacy around quality resource allocation for better programming. And I heard that through the principals. I heard that through the emphasis around arts, which I think, is what I heard as well. And then lastly, this kind of speaks to the Amy's last point, and also I guess like this group kind of in its genesis, which is the role of parents in making these choices and being engaged in the process and making sure that it's not an afterthought but it's an integral part to what the system is doing. Listen, I think that's what I heard. I just want to make sure that I'm accurate in that. I try to take some notes, but my pen stopped working. So I've been writing really hard on my desk so that I wouldn't miss the points. Listen, thank you for taking the time to communicate that with us directly. I know it took a little while for us to get this scheduled, so I do appreciate your patience, recognizing a little how hectic it is here at the department. I also think it's important to note that a lot of what you're saying here is not just in South Bronx, it's across the country. And I'm in Prince George's County, Maryland. We have 98% children of color. 64%, 66% of students are receiving free and reduced meals. And I can transpose some of what I heard from you to a group of parents in District Heights, Maryland right now. So it speaks to a larger issue that relates to the country. That's the role that we play at the department, is how do we take what we're hearing and enact policy that addresses what we're trying to fix nationally. The conversation around equity shouldn't just be academic, as someone said, but we should see some proof in the pudding, as some would say. And I think we're trying our hardest to do that. But we need you all to push us, challenge us, tell us we're wrong in that case. Lastly, just on resource, because I want to make sure that I narrow in on that. I provided in the chat a few additional websites and things that we're doing at the department. I would ask for you all to send to us any information that you want us to have in writing, not just the verbal that was communicated today, but anything you have in writing. I think Dr. Will, you had some information related to asthma rates in South Bronx. I think the other gentleman talked about the challenges, health challenges, some health challenges for students as well as it relates to the remote option. That will all be helpful for us. And then I don't know what you said to Dr. Samuel as it relates to follow-up, but I would recommend that we would probably engage in probably a few weeks just to check and see whether or not any progress has been made on some of the challenges you're having, or if there are additional resources we can bring to bear. I don't want to commit folk that aren't on the call, but I do think it makes sense for us not just to be a one and done. It may not be a formal big, let me be frank, it may not be a formal big group altogether, 20 folk give us their 3 to 5 minutes, but it may just be having a regular ongoing conversation about what's happening to help inform our thinking. I want to make sure that we're hearing from those who are actually doing the work, living this work every day. And that truly will inform policy. So I hope I captured what I heard. I hope I try to do it authentically so it was in the voice in which I heard it. I also recognize that we're limited in our ability to, decree from the department what should happen in South Bronx. But I do think we have the opportunity to communicate to all of our stakeholders what we're hearing and check in as appropriate on the progress that's being made. Hopefully, Farah, that did some justice to the call today and the wrap up. And if you could send a copy of a copy of this recording to the group department, that would be helpful just for us to follow back up and make sure that, you know, in our quiet time when we're reading our stories to our kids, we can have it on in our ear to listen to what people said again. That's our quiet evening routine for most of us here at the department. So thank you so much. I do appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Christian, and we're grateful for the opportunity. And yes, you heard us correctly. So we do want to make health, right, and nutrition and everything else that you heard, and like an intrinsic part of what education looks like. And we want it to be extended to families and communities, because that is the only way to truly uplift a community like ours and other communities like it, because the government and, you know, the private sector, they don't invest in us like that. So if the Department of Education is willing to invest in us like that, then we will gladly help you do that work, because that is the work we need in the Bronx to elevate ourselves and our babies.
Thank you so much. You all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a great evening. And say thank you to the rest of the team for giving us this time.
Surely will. Drew, look, they all left me. I got something to say to them, all right. Don't worry about it. But we will. But thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Right. Same to you.
Bye. Okay, team. So I guess we will debrief. Carla, are you going to send us a different link to debrief? Thank you so much. I don't know, did all the principals fall off? But Dr. Rosier is still here. Thank you. So how do you think we did?
I think that, Farah, I think you and your team are a powerhouse. I think it's so important that you guys make this connection with the United States.
Can Benga just stop the recording, please? It's still recording.
Yeah.
Apologize.
Yes. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We so appreciate you. Please email us any concerns, any testimonies that you would like us to forward. Thank you so much. You can always reach us at Bronx Parent Leaders Advocacy Group on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Okay. And Amy, can you give the email address? I think it's
sure. It is advocates at bxparentleaders.org is the email address, and you can reach out to us if you want to be a part of future educational justice conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Principal Rosier.
No, I was just saying this was
okay. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll just wait a few seconds.
Okay, all right. Carla always likes to get the public out first.
All right.